Hey guys, if you are thinking about moving to Canada, you may have heard this term over and over again. Proof of funds, money. How much money do you need to show when you are applying for permanent residence visa application? And is it the same if you are applying for temporary residence? And how can you successfully show that you have sufficient funds for your settlement when you are applying for Canadian visa? Hi, my name is Julius, and I'm a licensed Canadian immigration consultant who have helped several individuals and families move to and settle in Canada. And in this video, I'm going to give you guys some good educational tips regarding finances and proof of funds required for Canadian visa applications. Proof of funds varies widely across different permanent residence visas application. And also, it also varies across different types of temporary residence application. Take, for example, if you're applying for express entry, proof of funds requirement is generally around 15,000 Canadian dollars for one person, a single applicant. And if you are applying as a couple, then you need about 19,000 Canadian dollars. And also, if you're applying as a family of three, yourself, your spouse, and a child, then you're talking about around 23,000 Canadian dollars. If you have two children, and also yourself and your spouse are applying together, they're talking about 28,000 Canadian dollars plus. Now, one thing you have to bear in mind is that proof of funds have to be shown, even if you are not coming with your accompanying family members, you're not coming with family members, you have to show proof of funds, okay, for permanent resident visa applications, all right? So if your child is a Canadian citizen, and they're not applying for PR, you still have to show proof of funds for that child. For example, you have a family of three, your child is a Canadian citizen, yourself and your spouse are not Canadian citizen, obviously applying for PR, then you have to show proof of funds for a family of three regardless, okay? Or for example, you are applying for PR right now, but your spouse and your child will be applying for PR in the near future, or they won't apply at all, you still have to show proof of funds for a family of three. So it could be tricky sometimes. You want to make sure you have the right information when you apply for this type of applications. When it comes to PR applications and proof of funds, the money must be owned by you. You can't borrow money for proof of funds, okay? And your name must be in the document, your financial document, like a bank statement. You want to make sure you use a recognized bank from your home country or your country of residence, because not all banks are acceptable for proof of funds, okay? Sometimes they would ask you to show about 6 months bank statements. So you want to make sure that any transaction in the account that is like a large deposit, it is well addressed, because the visa officer might think that the money is there for demonstration purposes. So also, the money must be easily accessible. It has to be liquefied. That means you can't show things like a landed property and say, oh, this is the estimate for my house that I have in a certain country. You want to make sure that proof of fund is a liquid asset that can be easily accessible as well. So let's talk about proof of funds for temporary visas application for Canada. All right. So when we talk about temporary resident visas, we're talking about study permit, work permit, or visitor visas. And proof of funds across these three categories varies. Speaking about study permit, proof of funds consists of tuition fees that you haven't yet paid, living expenses, and transportation costs from your country of residence to Canada. Speaking about living expenses, from September 1st of 2025, the federal government will be increasing the proof of funds requirement for living expenses. So speaking about that, for a family of one, just yourself alone applying for study permit, you'll be showing about roughly 22,800 Canadian dollars per year as living expenses. For a family of two, yourself and a spouse applying alone, for example, we're talking about around 28,500 Canadian dollars. And then for a family of three, for example, yourself and your spouse and a child, they were talking about roughly 35,000 Canadian dollars per year as living expenses. Do not forget, living expenses is part of proof of funds for study permit. So you have to also factor cost of transportation as well as unpaid tuition fee for your program for Canada. So what documents count for proof of funds? What documents can you show to establish yourself that you have enough financially for your trip to Canada? When you're talking about proof of funds, the first and most common one is your bank statement. You want to make sure that you have a bank statement from a recognized bank, having your name or the name of your sponsor on it. Okay, and it has to be validated, because at the end of the day, the visa officer will have to verify that your bank statement is legitimate. Okay, so make sure you have something that is genuine. If you're applying for study permits, you can also provide a guaranteed investment certificate, funding called a GIC. But this one usually would have your living expenses, on inside of it. And then if you're applying for a visitor visa or a study permit and you have a sponsor, for example, your parent, then you have to provide a sponsorship letter. If you have a sponsor as your host in Canada, let's say, for example, your sister or your brother is inviting you to Canada and they'll be taking responsibility for your cost of living and every other expenses that you need, then they have to provide a supporting letter as a sponsorship letter to support that application. And also their means of livelihood as well, where they work, employment letter, pay slips, those things can also count as proof of funds as well. Because don't forget, if you are showing proof of fund and you say you're a sponsor, or your parents your sponsor, then they have to see that that parent or that sibling has the financial wherewithal to take care of your trip and your expenses. And also, your proof of funds can also be like a support letter from your school. If you're applying for study permits and your school is offering a scholarship or some form of research or teaching assistantship, then they have to give you like a letter showing that they are there to take care of your expenses, as the case may be. So the document you have to show proof of funds varies depending on the type of visa application you are submitting, and also depending on who is going to be supporting that trip for you. If you are using a sponsor, obviously you need third-party documents. If it's just yourself, then all the documents will come from you. Things that you prepared for can also count as proof of funds. For example, if you intend to study in Canada and you've already made some tuition fees deposit, the money you've paid can count as proof of funds, provided you show the receipt, the official receipt that can be verified when you're applying for your visa. Okay, so let's say you paid 10,000 as tuition fees, you can show that official receipt, and then you can deduct that 10,000 from the overall required proof of funds for that visa application you intend to submit. Okay, and for example, if you're also applying for a visitor visa and you've already bought your flight ticket, you can also showcase the receipt that you spent in terms of that you got in terms of paying for that flight ticket, and that could also count as proof of funds, and you can deduct that from the total cost estimated for your trip to Canada. All right, so these things kind of varies on a case-by-case basis. Also, there are some certain things that you also have to avoid when it comes to proof of funds, some certain red flags. All right, so do not provide joint bank statement without getting like a consent letter from the other party. For example, if you have a spouse and your spouse is providing, you guys have a joint bank statement together and you're using that bank statement for your application, you also want to get a letter from your spouse attesting to the fact that she's okay or is okay with you spending money from that account. All right. Try not to borrow money from a friend or from a relative. You can actually get loan, right, from a recognized institution for proof of funds, right? Especially if you're applying for study permit, you can use loans, study loans, provided it's coming from a recognized institution, and that will not be a problem, all right? But if you're applying for things like a visitor visa, it doesn't really go well when you say you took a loan for a trip that is highly discretionary. And also, if you're applying for things like permanent residence, you can't use loan obviously for that. It has to be money that belongs to you. All right. You can use gift to some certain extent, but that gift also has to be well explained in your application. That is the bottom line. Proof of funds for permanent residence application, for the most part, is usually fixed. All right. Depending on the period application you are applying for. It's not a function of how much time you want to spend in Canada. So that's why I'm saying it's fixed, all right? And it has to be well presented, well documented as well. There are some certain things that count as proof of funds for PR, meaning that if you're already working in Canada, you can actually be exempted for proof of funds, or depending on the category you're applying for. For example, if you're applying for the Canadian Experience class, that may exempt you from proof of funds requirement. Another thing you have to understand is that the money has to be your own. When you're applying for PR application, your proof of funds has to be your own. You cannot borrow money for this process. You cannot say my aunt is sponsoring me for PR. It has to be your own. Could it be a gift? That is possible, but you have to have proper guidance for that process. Talking about temporary resident visas, it is kind of flexible because it depends on how much your tuition fee is, how much time you're spending in Canada, how much your vacation would be, and things of that nature. It has to be well presented as well. Very well presented, okay? People submit documents that are very difficult for the visa officer to find the information, and they begin to wonder, why was I refused when I provided all my documents? So it's a skill to have to prepare documents that are well presentable. So you want to make sure you have the right guidance before you submit that application. The money can be borrowed money when it comes to temporary visa application, especially for study permits, okay? You can get a study loan to study in Canada. It's not your money, you will pay back, but that could also count for proof of fund. But it has to come from a recognized financial institution. We're talking about visitor visa application. I wouldn't advise you to actually borrow money for that because these trips are highly discretionary, so you should have the money for your vacation in Canada. But you can actually have support from a host, right? It could be well justified. You have a sister in Canada, you're coming to visit, you are the younger one, and that person will be taking care of the entire trip. That could also make sense sometimes. Or you are already in Canada as a PR, but you want your mom to come to Canada to visit you, your mom is retired, and you'll be taking care of the trip. Then it kind of makes sense sometimes. So the key thing here is that you have to be honest with your application, provide clear and very factual documents, okay? And also make sure you do your best to get the right advice you need before you submit that application. So if you are not sure about what to do when it comes to proof of funds, you want to make sure you book a one-on-one consultation section with me to get the right guidance that you need before you submit the application. Because guess what? Finances, proof of funds issues is one of the most common reasons why people are being refused for Canadian visas, and you want to avoid that when you submit your own application. If this video helped you, please like and share this video. Also comment how this video helped you or which area is confusing you the most when it comes to proof of funds for Canadian visa. Be sure that I'm going to respond to your comment, and also do not forget to subscribe on this channel so you do not miss helpful videos like this in the near future. So it was nice having you here again. If you stayed this video to the very end, always know that you're the real one, and see you in my next video. Bye for now.